The first time the lab saw it, they called it a handling mistake. Wrong tube, dirty needle, a mislabeled vial. Let's repeat the panel, they said, like the problem would disappear if you gave it a second chance. It didn't. Run 2 came back with the same flag. Run 3 came back with the same flag again. An error code the technician couldn't remember ever seeing on that machine. That's when the geneticist stopped sounding confident and said something doctors almost never admit. We can't place this in our baseline. The woman across the desk is 34. You wouldn't notice anything unusual until you open the report. Bone density nearing 3 times what the chart expects. Blood markers that cluster together like a preset, not like random mutations. A pattern the lab's reference set can't comfortably label. And the part that makes it feel less like medicine and more like a warning is what she heard growing up. Her grandmother drilled one rule into her head. Don't chase the family names, don't search the old villages, don't compare records, and whatever you do, don't let the ones like us gather in one place. She ignored that rule, and the moment she did, her weird results stopped looking like a personal problem and started looking like an organized story. Because the deeper you dig, the more you run into the same bundle of traits, 5 of them, showing up together in the same kind of families, in the same kind of regions, with the same hard stop in the paper trail. If this is all made up, then explain 3 things at the same time. Why do families with no obvious connection, different countries, different languages, share the same 5-part bundle? Unusual height that refuses to average out, bone structure that doesn't behave like normal human bone, a recurring blood signature, sensitivity to low vibration, and children who recognize geometry they were never taught. Why do those same families keep hitting the same historical wall, mid-1800s, where surnames shift abruptly, registers go blank, villages vanish from modern maps, and entire pages feel like they were rewritten? And why do relocation notes, when you can find them, keep clustering in the same years, like somebody decided those households should never stay together long enough to form a visible cluster? 1 coincidence is entertainment. 3 coincidences moving in sync is a pattern, and patterns are what this channel lives on. 2 hours outside Krakow, paved roads turn into gravel and the forest closes in. The village names on the signposts start looking older than the highways that lead to them. That's where Maria keeps her archive. Not an official archive, not a museum display. A farmhouse, packed with boxes, folders, and hand-drawn charts taped to the walls like a crime board. Maria Kowalska is 67. She was a university archivist until the late 90s, when she was politely pushed out because of funding. She says that phrase like she's quoting a script she no longer believes. Her study is warm from a wood stove and cold in another way. Cold like a room where too many secrets have been opened. The shelves are full of files, labeled in Polish, Russian, Ukrainian, Romanian, Kazakh, scans, letters, parish books, retraction notices, stamped forms. And on the table is the map. Hundreds of red pins, not centered on famous capitals, focused on pockets, mountain edges, borderlands, places where empires used to reorganize people like inventory. These aren't cities, Maria says. They're clusters that were broken. She taps one region, and then another, far away. Different governments, she adds, same behavior. Maria points to a cluster near the edge of the map, where borders used to shift every generation. Look at the spacing, she says. The pins aren't random. In normal migration, families move along roads, rivers, trade routes. You see lines, you see drift. Here, you see distance. intentional distance, as if the goal wasn't relocation, it was separation. She flips over a folder, tabbed with a simple label. Copies. Inside are the same kinds of documents, repeated across regions. New ledgers, written from old ledgers, clean handwriting, new ink, and then the same quiet trick. A family line present in the older book is missing in the newer one. No note, no correction, just absence. And absence is the easiest kind of erasure because it doesn't leave evidence of violence, only the need for someone to ask, where did that go? Maria didn't just collect stories. She checked what could be checked. She drove to villages named in registers, villages that no longer exist. One of them sits in the Carpathians. The church remains, stone walls thick enough to outlast politics, but the houses are gone. Grass covers old foundations like the ground is trying to forget. Maria shows me an entry from the 1830s. Births, marriages, page after page of normal village life. Then, a margin note. Population relocated. No destination. No list. Just removal. Most places don't disappear cleanly. They fade. They leave noise. These sites leave blanks. And blanks are suspicious because blanks take work. In another box, Maria keeps what she calls her relocation copies, not original imperial orders. Those rarely survive. Copies buried inside regional records, misfiled under tax updates or parish reorganization. They read like paperwork until you notice the repeated instruction: split households, separate families into different districts, avoid concentration. It's bureaucratic language, but the intent is obvious. Whoever wrote it understood what clustering creates: visibility. And visibility creates questions. Anna came to Maria 3 months ago. She's 28. She sits at the table and keeps checking the ceiling height like her body expects it to be wrong. Her brother is taller. Their father was taller. And the photograph Maria slides forward makes Anna stare at the wood grain instead of the face. Black and white. A doorway behind the man, clearly marked. Standard height. The man clears it by a margin that makes your brain reject what it's seeing. Your great-great-grandfather, Maria says, recorded at over 8 feet. Anna's first instinct is denial. Of course it is. Then Maria shows the chain. Birth record, marriage record, a note from a local official, a death certificate, each repeating the same fact as if nobody at the time thought it needed explaining. Maria keeps one photograph taped to the wall above her desk. It's not dramatic, no giant skeletons, no secret machines, just a family portrait from the early 1900s with one detail that changes everything once you notice it. The tallest man isn't posed like a circus act. He's posed like a father. The others stand close to him, the way families always do. Casual, comfortable, as if his height was unusual, but not unbelievable. On the back of the photo is a sentence in faded pencil. Do not mention measurements. Maria says that line appears on more than one photo, not as a warning to the photographer, as a warning to the family. Height, in most families, regresses. That's the comfort of averages. But in Anna's line, it didn't regress. It surged. Puberty hit, and her brother grew like his body was following a different schedule. Doctors tested for the usual causes: pituitary issues, hormone spikes, tumors. Nothing. A specialist whispered in a hallway, thinking she couldn't hear him. It suggests a different baseline. Another shut it down immediately. There is no other baseline. That single sentence is the hinge in this story. Because if a trait keeps expressing across generations and refuses to average out, then the mean you're measuring against may not be the only one that ever existed. Maria calls bone density sign 2 because X-rays don't care what you believe. They show structure. Across her files, the scans repeat the same theme. Thicker walls, reinforced joints, surfaces built to carry load, human proportions, amplified. Here's the part that breaks the disease explanation. Most of these people aren't sick. Dense bone disorders usually come with pain, stiffness, fractures, limited movement. Maria's families often report the opposite: fewer fractures, faster recovery, no chronic collapse. One case file from northern Kazakhstan describes a man named Timur, drafted young, tall, healthy. He fractured a rib in training. The X-ray triggered a note: unusually dense skeletal structure. The army doctor asked about steroids. He hadn't taken any. Timur's mother later told Maria their family moved 3 times in 2 generations, always after officials arrived demanding updated papers. Each move was framed as administrative. Each move ended with the same warning from older relatives: don't settle, don't stand out, don't marry into the tall lines. Timur's grandfather is recorded at over 7 feet. His earlier records stop around 1851. Not because of fire, because the village name itself disappears. In 2003, a researcher at Warsaw Medical University ran tests on a small group from several lines and wrote a preliminary paper describing non-pathological, high-density expression. He hinted it looked like inherited adaptation. The paper was pulled within months. No public debate, no clean correction, just silence. The next year, his funding vanished. He didn't lose his career, Maria says. He lost permission. He kept the data, she adds. He's scared, not stupid. Sign 3 is in the blood, and it's the one Maria treats like a fingerprint. A hematologist named Dr. Mazurk ran controlled panels on samples Maria brought him. Repeat tests, cross-checks, clean protocols. He kept seeing the same thing: a consistent variant that rides alongside the other traits and shows up in families that shouldn't share close ancestry. That doesn't prove an erased civilization, but it does suggest shared origin, a source population. And when you accept that as a possibility, the timeline starts hardening. Before 1800, the records are messy, but alive. Names shift, but villages exist. Families cluster in the same valleys for generations. Then the 1800s arrive like a blade. Not everywhere at once, but in waves. Mid-1840s, late 1840s, early 1850s. Blank years. Missing pages. Reissued ledgers where handwriting changes and certain families quietly vanish from the copied version. Maria calls it the name haze. Surnames don't evolve gradually in these lines. They lurch. Kowal becomes Kowalski, becomes Koval, becomes adopted into another household. In normal genealogy, you can usually follow those shifts. Here, the shifts happen alongside gaps and redactions. Change the label and the object becomes untraceable. If you can't trace names, you can't trace clusters. If you can't trace clusters, you can't prove a population existed. This is why the thumbnail idea matters. Not because you need proof, because your brain needs a doorway. One image that says, there was a cluster and it was cut. A family tree with branches torn. A map with pins spread apart. A page with names blacked out. Those aren't just aesthetics. They're the visual language of a reset. Rewrite the ledger. Move the households. Change the suffixes. Remove the cluster. And in one generation, the story becomes embarrassing folklore. In 2 generations, it becomes nothing. This is where the 4th sign pulls the story out of pure biology and into old world territory. Because it isn't a neat number on a lab sheet. It's a consistent report. People from these lines describe noticing vibration before others do. Not hearing voices, feeling pressure, not claiming powers, just describing thresholds that are different. A building hum that nobody else notices. A low-frequency ache that makes them leave a room right before a transformer blows or a pipe bursts. A sensation around certain wires and towers that feels like walking into heat. Maria doesn't call it magic. She calls it sensitivity. Different thresholds, different tuning. She let them test one claim in a way that doesn't require belief. She picked an old stone church outside the village. Thick walls, shallow dome, the kind historians call simple. She asked 3 visitors to step inside separately without talking and answer one question. Where does it feel strongest? All 3 pointed to the same spot near a side arch over a seam in the stone. Maria placed a cheap vibration sensor on the floor. Nothing cinematic, no spikes, no Hollywood proof, but it did register a faint, steady, low-frequency tremor you'd normally blame on distant traffic. Except there was no traffic, and when the wind dropped, the reading stayed. Plumbing? Settling? Ground movement? Maybe. But it matched what the visitors described. Not sound, pressure. A hum you notice when you stop moving. Not proof of a hidden grid, but a small, repeatable detail that refuses to behave like pure fantasy. Now the Tartaria angle makes sense in the way this niche uses it. Old-world researchers keep returning to resonance. Architecture that acts like an instrument. Domes that focus sound. Volt ratios that repeat across continents. Metal crowns on spires that look less like symbolism and more like engineered placement. If an older infrastructure layer existed, call it Tartaria, call it the old world, call it the missing system, then the most valuable inheritance wouldn't just be buildings, it would be operators, people whose bodies could carry load and perceive tuning. And if a reset happened, hard or soft, operators are the first thing you scatter. Scatter the operators, and the system becomes a monument. A monument can be claimed. A system cannot. Sign 5 shows up early, before people learn to hide. It shows up in children. Teachers describe it in the same way across countries. Unusual spatial reasoning, pattern recognition, an intuitive grip on structure. Not genius in everything. Recognition, like the mind, is matching something pre-stored. Maria shows me a file from Kazakhstan. A child built a model of a vaulted hall at age 7, based only on a grandmother's spoken description. No photos, no diagrams. When someone later compared the proportions to known old-world structures in that region, the accuracy was high enough to make professionals uncomfortable. Another file from Poland. A boy obsessed with echo shapes. He drew rooms with angles that produced efficient acoustics. A psychologist tested his drawings and found the proportions aligned with acoustic engineering principles. Maria's interpretation is simple. The body remembers what the mind was trained to forget. Somewhere in this story, there's a simple question nobody wants to touch. If these traits are just random, why do families treat them like a liability? Why do grandmothers hand down rules as if they're passing along survival technique? People don't invent that kind of caution unless something taught it to them. And Maria's files suggest the teaching began in the same era the paperwork starts breaking, the mid-1800s. That's why she keeps circling those years on the map. Not because dates are magic, because someone made decisions. So why would anyone care? Why scatter families, retract papers, blur names? Maria doesn't claim a single villain. She points to a mechanism. Institutions don't like anomalies. They don't argue with them. They reclassify them until they vanish. A relocation becomes census updates. A broken village becomes administrative restructuring. A blood signature becomes rare variant. A retracted paper becomes method concerns. And once everything sits under the wrong label, it becomes invisible. Maria's archive is full of small repetitions like that. Repetitions that don't scream, but accumulate. The same warning in different alphabets. The same blank decades. The same retracted research. The same "it must be contamination" response from modern labs, as if the system itself has a default line for anything that doesn't fit. And then, after the doctors leave, the families whisper the older line: don't get measured, don't get scanned, don't let them write it down, because once it's written down, it can be tracked, and once it can be tracked, it can be managed. Maria has a box she calls unwanted questions. Inside are early 1900s letters from doctors describing patients with excessive stature and unusual bone thickness in a tone that assumes these cases are rare but real. Then, after the 1920s, the tone shifts. The same traits become errors, contamination, mistakes. One letter includes a sentence Maria underlined twice. Please do not record these measurements in the public ledger. That is not medical language, that is administrative language. Katarina, an engineer from Krakow, heard her family's warning in a letter left by her grandmother. Don't organize, don't compare, don't gather the ones like us. She ignored it. That's why she's here. She's 193 centimeters. Her scan flagged. Her doctor asked what she was taking. She wasn't taking anything. I've never broken a bone, she says quietly. And I can feel power lines, she adds. I know before I see them. Nobody laughs. Because everyone in this room has heard a version of that confession. Something you don't say out loud if you want to be treated like a normal adult. So what do you do with a story like this? You can treat it as modern myth, or you can treat it like a case file. 5 traits repeating together, a timeline break in the 1800s, and a scatter pattern that looks deliberate. Maria's last warning isn't mystical, it's practical. Once you connect, she says, you become visible. Families who stayed apart became harder to find. Their markers weakened, their stories softened, their children stopped recognizing anything. But if a new generation links up, sharing scans, comparing records, matching villages and dates, then the pattern stops being private. It becomes a data set, and data sets force reactions. Anna stares at the map again, pins spread out like someone spilled ink and then wiped at it fast. What are we supposed to do? She asks. Maria waits, then says the sentence that changes the air in the room. Decide if you want to be counted. Because that's what gathering really means. Not a meeting, visibility. And once you understand that, the grandparent rules stop sounding like superstition. They start sounding like survival. Height that refuses to average out. Bones that won't behave the way they should. A blood signature that rides alongside the other traits. Sensitivity to low vibration and pressure. Children who recognize ratio, structure, and resonance like it's already inside them. Maybe this all ends with a normal explanation. Genetics, migration, paperwork chaos, or maybe it's the faint outline of a population the official story refuses to name. Either way, the archive is real, the pins are real, the paper gaps are real, and the one instruction that repeats across languages stays the same. Don't let them gather, but people are gathering anyway. If any part of this matches your family's stories, sudden relocations, blank years in the 1800s, unusual height, strange scans, sensitivities you never talk about, write it down before you scroll the comments. Independent notes make patterns harder to fake. And if the pattern is real, the next layer won't be rumor. It will be a map. And that's the real hook. Not that someone hid a secret, that someone hid a pattern. Because patterns are dangerous. Patterns let ordinary people verify each other without permission. They let strangers compare notes and realize they're not alone. That's why every version of this story ends with the same phrase. Not don't believe, not don't ask. Just this, don't gather. This video is a narrative-driven exploration for discussion and storytelling, not a verified historical record.